Conservative is the new punk. That's what I keep hearing throughout the grapevine, and while some would laugh at that statement in comparison to liberal being the new punk, I think there's a lot of truth to it. To me, being punk is about being yourself, saying what you want, and not worrying about what other people think. Sure, style and music are big parts of it, but the overall idea is that those who are punk tend to be rebellious. So you can imagine the look on my face when this article came across my screen. Florida punk rock show charges vaccinated fans $18 while unvaccinated fans are charged $1,000 per ticket. Huh? So basically, punk went from giving the middle finger to the establishment to obeying the establishment. And yes, I realize we're in the middle of a pandemic. However, there are countless reasons why people are reluctant to take the jab. But unfortunately for us, we have big tech over here working overtime to censor those who experience adverse effects after taking it. Almost like companies that delete negative reviews made about them so they can maintain their prestige to the public. Yeah, because that's totally transparent. But the fact that this band refers to themselves as punk while, let's be real, they're following the herd is a joke. Following the establishment, regardless if someone wants to trust the science, isn't punk, it's conformity. Come to think of it, pretty much everything has been infected with this woke, obedient to the government, safe space rhetoric, and it's killing culture, it's killing creativity, and if the establishment has its way, it will eventually kill our freedom. But the good news is, we have an opportunity to swing back the pendulum to its rightful position, or in some cases, reposition the pendulum completely for the better. So, if you're feeling rebellious today, buckle up, kiddo, because it's time for us to win the culture war. This video is sponsored by No Systems. No Systems is a clothing brand that designs unique streetwear with a punk rock attitude. One of the core values of No Systems is to see beneath the surface, which is something that I always encourage on this channel. Here's a look at some of their latest shirts that they sent me, with my favorite being this one right here. Yep, even I deal with imposter syndrome sometimes. So if you like what you see, go ahead and use code Gothix to save 20% off your order. I'm gonna be honest with you. As I get older, I always find myself reminiscing about the 90s and how everything was less sensitive, more fun, and way more tolerant than how we're living at this very moment. Some folks attribute this shift to society becoming more bigoted as a result of Trump, conservatives, or the Republican Party, and to that, my response is, you're out of your fucking mind. I always assumed that this progression of culture was just society naturally shifting because as a millennial, older generations would accuse my age group of screwing things up. And as an adult, I've started to say the exact same thing about Generation Z. So I figured this is just business as usual. You grow up, you get old, you blame everything on the younger generation, and then you die. I honestly believed this until 2020 when I started to really pay attention to what was happening. We have punk rock siding with the government, politically correct comedy, and the forcible suppression of opposition, aka fascism, being rebranded as cancel culture or accountability culture. Society is literally leading itself to conformity without even realizing it. We're being fed the idea that the more woke and the more politically correct and inclusive we are, the better society will become. But what does that mean when wokeness paints everything as harmful? Or when political correctness suppresses creativity? Or when inclusiveness encourages forced diversity because people stop caring about what's up here and started obsessing over their skin color or their gender as if those were core attributes that make us who we are? The fact is, they don't. Woke rhetoric has been poisoning our society for years with the promises that it's for the greater good. But realistically, who determines the greater good? To an oppressive government, the greater good could mean little subservient slaves who do as they're told and conform to our standards. One point that I find myself constantly making on this channel is, there is no utopia. And anyone who tries to convince you the oppression of another person will benefit the greater good isn't a good person themselves. Because in the words of Tom Sowell,
that man is flawed from day one. And that there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. and whatever you do to deal with one of man's flaws, it creates another problem, but that you try to get the best trade-off you can get, and that's all you can hope for.
Some people believe that if they could just make this thing as politically correct or as safe as possible, it will change the world for the better. But if the act of policing someone else's behavior strips them of their individuality, you're simply oppressing another person, all in the name of progress. I mean, we can't even look to entertainment as an escape anymore because our favorite shows, movies, and hobbies have been saturated with this social justice nonsense. But if there's one thing that I want to stress in this video, is that now is the time to punch back. Not literally, by the way. Please don't assault anyone. So how do we do this? How do we win the culture war? Well, I've thought about this for a lot, and I think I might have some ideas, but in order for me to explain, I'm gonna have to offend some people. So if I've got any safe space Patricks watching right now, suck it up because shit's about to get real. The reality is, we have a lot of sheep on this planet. Yes, I said sheep. People that go with the flow, never question anything, and a lot of the times blindly latch on to trends or movements because their desires to be included or praised is greater than their confidence to just exist as they are without the validation of others. And please, spare me with a rebuttal for this because you and I both know we saw a lot of sheep in 2020. People thinking they're helping by throwing up a black square or virtue signaling the hell out of whatever hashtag came across their timeline. But these things don't actually make a difference. It's a performance, and that's it. Racism won't go away just because you tweet out a hashtag, and spreading awareness can only do so much without action, otherwise you're just complaining. And if people truly believed in the cause of Black Lives Matter, for example, then I, a black woman, would never be called racial slurs by Black Lives Matter supporters, which ironically happens way too often. So when you realize that this behavior doesn't actually aid in making the world a better place, you're forced to consider the real reason a person would latch onto a movement like this, aside from them claiming to actually care about what they're advocating for. Which brings me to my resolution. If we understand that most people are very tribal and have a tendency to latch on to trends just because everyone else is doing it, then we should treat this culture war with the same marketing that you would see from any type of product. I'm sure most people can think back to a point in their childhood where they felt left out for not fitting in with everyone else. And as an adult, I think we can admit that there are a lot of people who make a habit of buying expensive things only to flaunt it on social media for the likes and the retweets. Even if most people don't want to admit this, subconsciously their actions show just how much they care about what other people think of them. Because if this wasn't true, something like the concept of fashion trends or lookbooks wouldn't exist. Designers know that if something garners enough publicity, eventually the masses will start to follow. So here's my proposition. Instead of being outraged or angry about wokeness plaguing our lives, we should instead shift the focus towards countering it in a way that taps into society's desire to be accepted, included, or cool. Obviously, coolness is subjective, but there is a general consensus of what is and isn't cool depending on how popular a particular style, hobby, or behavior is. So let's consider my channel for a second. Politics and social issues generally aren't viewed as cool. I mean, when's the last time you heard someone say, "Oh my God, I just love Ben Shapiro's vibe. I want to be just like him"? Probably never. Granted, his sarcastic humor is pretty funny, but the way that he brands himself doesn't really relate to a lot of people, if you catch my drift. It's the same for Candace Owens, for example. When people think of a black conservative woman, most people instantly think of her, which sort of builds this perception of what a black conservative woman would look or act like. And once that perception has been built, it becomes really hard to separate yourself from how everyone else sees you. Which is probably why a lot of my critics immediately assume I'm trying to be the next Candace Owens because they attribute my opinions to conservative talking points. But if you're familiar with my channel, then you'll know firsthand, I've never in the history of uploading content labeled myself a conservative or pledged allegiance to any particular party. It's almost like how some people view MAGA supporters. A lot of society has been convinced that anyone wearing a red hat is deserving of hate because that hat somehow symbolizes bigotry, racism, or whatever else the current trendy insult is. And I can relate to this because I'm someone who's had a variety of unique hairstyles, and I have to constantly separate myself from the crazies because side shaves and vibrant hair color is apparently the new social justice uniform. I had no idea. And don't get it twisted, I believe everyone should be allowed to express themselves without having to deal with gatekeepers, cultural appropriation. However, when personal ideology starts to overtake something that's already established, that's where I have a problem. There is no reason why conservatives or Republicans should be looking at me assuming that I'm a far leftist or an SJW. This haircut and vibrant hair dye was around long before people added a political agenda to it. But as annoying as it is for people to assume my intentions just because of my haircut, we can still learn a lot about human behavior just by looking at some of the comments I get on this channel. A lot of my first-time viewers tend to perceive me in a certain way, like this comment right here. So this tells me that people are assuming my beliefs before I even open up my mouth, because mainstream media would make you believe that people with this hair don't hold the positions that I do. But as time goes on and people start to familiarize themselves with how I think or speak, they start to see something different. Like these folks who thought I came right out of Cyberpunk 2077, or even these viewers who believe I'd make the perfect Storm in an X-Men movie. For the non-nerds out there, characters from both Cyberpunk and X-Men are generally really intelligent and have this kind of badass vibe to them. And I'm not just saying this so I can get labeled a narcissist, that's just what it is. So once viewers realized that I wasn't combative or unhinged like a lot of people who tend to rock the same look as I do, the perception of angry SJW was replaced with intellectual badass. And yes, I did give myself that name, I'm just putting 2 and 2 together. And that's the secret recipe. What is your target demographic and how can you connect with them? Well, my target demographic are viewers that tend to be interested in nerd culture. You know, video games, comic books, meme culture, things like that. And the reason that I want to target this particular demographic is because these groups tend to favor progressive or liberal-ish ideas. And I think that was intentionally by design. This was very apparent with my experience being a Twitch.tv streamer. Once 2020 rolled around, the Twitch platform became a giant echo chamber of vote blue no matter who, otherwise you're canceled. Video games aren't specific to a certain political leaning, but it can certainly be perceived that way when a particular space is always circulating almost exclusively with left-leaning ideas. So as much as I dislike AOC's politics, she was very smart to stream video games on Twitch leading up to the 2020 election. You want to guess how many Republican or Libertarian candidates streamed video games on Twitch last year? Take a guess. Come to think of it, I'd love an opportunity to play Among Us with the current administration. I'm sure I could find an imposter or two. My point being, the goal is to connect with your audience in a way that makes your message relatable. So in the context of, let's say, identity politics taking over society, in response, there should be a big push to encourage individuality. If comedy is under attack by political correctness, then comedians need to take a stand and be as unfiltered and unrestricted with their craft without fear of offending anyone. And trust me when I say, there are a lot more people who appreciate classic adult humor over safe space comedy. And if our entertainment is being dominated by woke ideas, then we need to start brainstorming to create new shows, movies, or other forms of entertainment that counter the woke message. Like the show Tuttle Twins, which is an animated series currently in production that will teach kids the principles of freedom, economics, and government, which is a nice change of pace from a lot of the kids shows I've been seeing pop up lately. Like this scene from Blue's Clues. You remember Blue's Clues? Good old Blue's Clues. Take a look at this.
Hey Blue, look at all these families! Hi families! It's time for a pride parade! Families marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah! Families marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah!
Yeah, it's not the LGBT parade that I have an issue with. It's the clenched fist that's commonly used by organizations or movements that have been heavily influenced by Marxism. But Gothix, that fist is a symbol for BLM. Oh yeah? Do you see any black people in this video? Who is it? The beaver? Is it the owl? It's the owl, isn't it? You know what? Never mind, I digress. The overall point that I'm trying to make is that if you're not okay with wokeness, now is the time to stop complaining about it and start taking action, either by creating something that counters wokeness or financially backing something that counters wokeness. And remember, the goal is to make your message as relatable as possible to the demographic you're trying to connect with. But do so without trying to seem like you're attempting to change someone's mind or get someone on your side, because let's be real, after looking at the campaigns for the vaccine, we can see that not everyone responds well to peer pressure or guilt. Most people don't want to hear a lecture from their parents or be told that they're doing something wrong, but if you shift your plan of attack to instead offer a solution to the problem, whatever that problem may be, they might be more receptive to your message. For example, let's look at the hip-hop industry. The songs that get the most airtime or publicity tend to be those that promote drug use, infidelity, or gang violence, right? So it's no surprise that someone like Tom MacDonald is dominating the Billboard charts by using his platform to address real issues like cancel culture, for example, as opposed to rapping about popping pills and acquiring copious amounts of bitches. Thus, supply and demand. Or let's consider how the Marxist indoctrination of critical race theory is being implemented throughout education. The only reason we got to this point is because BLM created a sense of urgency by building the narrative that their movement was the solution to racism. Thus, once again, supply and demand.
Brad, show him how it's done. Boom. Sell me that pen. Watch. Go on.
Let me sell this fucking pen.
That's my boy right there.
This pen.
Fucking sell anything.
Why don't you do me a favor? Why'd you name down that napkin for me?
I don't have a pen.
Exactly. Supply and demand, my friend.
You know what I'm saying? He's creating urgency.
Wolf of Wall Street is one of my favorite movies, by the way. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope these tips helped you out and provided some perspective on how we can win this culture war. And if you're still lost on what you can do to help, take a step back and observe your surroundings. You can learn a lot about people simply by watching what they do or how they react. There's a market waiting to be tapped into. You just have to find it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. My name is Gothix and I will see you in the next one. I'm looking forward to this culture war, actually. I'm quite excited. I'm quite down with victimhood. Down!